And so what I'll do is go off stage now, and after that introduction, and hand over to you, Amanda, for today's session. Thanks again for presenting this to our audience.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to all of you for being here to allow me to share any skills and knowledge that I have on coping skills for kids. So I won't go into any more detail, except I am an early childhood teacher, a counsellor, hypnotherapist, strategic psychotherapist, and NLP master practitioner. As mentioned, I do own 4 early learning centres, and I have my private practice, Positive Thinking Clinic. I also have 2 boys and 2 dogs and 1 cat and a wonderful husband. So why did I decide coping skills for kids? Let me just say this. Of all the kids that come to me in my clinic, they come with their daily challenges, their daily issues, whether they are fears or whether they are worries, concerns, and whatever it is that they're not coping with. And so we experiment, we're creative, we explore, and we look at all these different techniques that kids can take away and practice. Now, I began to notice a pattern. I began to notice that kids became the experts. They were coming to me and they were telling me what was actually working. And so then I'd have different clients, different kids of all ages. And then I was remembering what was working for other kids. And then I was transferring this learning and these wonderful suggestions to other kids. And then again, I noticed another pattern, and I decided with kids to create a 4-step COPE formula. Now, it's not a black and white model. In fact, through all the different challenges, and there may be anger or sadness, busy mind, relationships, etc., whatever the daily challenge is, we can apply a 4-step COPE formula. Now, on this slide, you will notice that I have a book and a link to this book. I've also got my kids coping course. It's a self-learning for kids. What I like to teach kids is about a growth mindset, being open to learning and being excited to see things from a different perspective. We go through, now I know a lot of you could be parents, you could be teachers, you could be counsellors, therapists. So I'm just going to address you as if we're all interested in just amazing ways that we can help kids cope with everyday challenges. So we teach kids that life is full of challenges. This already normalizes things and takes away the fear of all challenging moments. And we let them know that even adults have challenging moments as well. And also we teach kids that they can be experts of themselves, even though they want to rely on other opinions and advice. If we engage children to become their own experts, then they help personalize it and they create their own little unique formulas. So we teach children how to cope with challenges, and that not to expect a smooth day. In fact, expect a day full of potholes and little bumps and little dead ends. It's about moving through them smoothly. And so that's why we're not going to worry too much about challenging moments. We teach kids that these are wonderful opportunities for them to practice their coping skills. So now, I just want to let you all know as well that, of course, I have the slides in a PDF for you to download. And I also, if you noticed, I have a whole bunch of PDFs that you can download. It's the COPE formula. The little activities that I will go through on my slides, I have them for you to download as well. The COPE formula itself. So I hope that you find these helpful. Now I'm going to go through the 4-step COPE formula. C, and this is the general version. C is be the curious detective. Be curious about the challenge. O is observe your thoughts and feelings and ask, what would my inner coping skills coach say or do instead? And then P, imagine a positive outcome. Visualize how you want to solve the challenge, and then you can make up a funny or inspiring affirmation to reframe the challenge. And then E, think like an explorer. Explore your options. And there are lots of new thoughts, feelings, and actions that you could try as challenges happen. So try taking your inner coping coach's suggested action. So basically, this is the 4-step formula that I use with kids. Now, I decided to grab a whole bunch of topics that kids are presenting concern for, or where they feel that they're getting stuck. And so one of them happens to be the busy mind. Now, I'm sure some of you are also saying, well, I'm an adult and I have a busy mind as well. I came to realize with kids, actually, whatever the challenge, it applies for kids, whether they're 5, 10, 15, or whether we are speaking to adults. We're just changing the language. So in particular, the book and course that I did was specific for 8 to 12-year-olds. Forgive me, it's not specific. It allows. You just change the language. And you'll find that some of these techniques that kids will use, when I give you examples of the fun activities, you yourself as an adult can apply that as well. So now, the busy mind. Some kids say, I feel my brain is cuckoo. Some kids say, I've just turned into an overwhelming, monster. They call all these, they label themselves actually, or they label what's going on in their brain. And so I kind of created the busy mind monster. And this is how I explain it to kids. So you wake up, you get ready for school, you go to school, you play, you go home, you do sport, you eat, you do your homework, you get ready for bed, and then you're just about to drift off when, okay, there it happens, boom. The busy mind monster chooses to remind you of the entire day. And then you start worrying about tomorrow. And then it's on repeat. And so see how it can relate to some adult minds as well? So imagine a child who has all these feelings of overwhelm and they just don't know how to unwind so that can, even to compartmentalize so they can break things up. Because when everything's happening all at the one time, there's the recipe for overwhelm. So I teach kids about their amazing mind and that no one else has the exact same mind as you. You are unique. And as challenges happen, you can embrace them and say, what can I learn from these? So we diminish the fear about overwhelm and little worries that they have. And so I teach kids to even organize their mind. Now, going to my next slide, I have a formula for each topic. So for the busy mind, we discuss with kids. Be curious about the thoughts that you're having. Challenge the ones that are not useful. Sort them into the right containers, and you'll see what I mean soon when I give an example, and let go of the ones that are not helpful or important. Then, observe your mind's busy habits so that you can learn your patterns. Quite often, kids and even adults are not in tune with the pattern that they run. So now we're inviting individuals to pay attention to their patterns. Observe how your thoughts make you feel and behave, and this helps you to get to know yourself better. Then, P, write a positive affirmation about what you want instead. For example, I feel good about A because I get to choose B instead. Be the boss of your mind by planning when to attend to worries. Don't let your mind be the boss of you. And I say that, don't let your mind be the boss of you, because we want children to feel that they're in charge of their mind and the patterns that they're running, or at least to learn how to interrupt their patterns and perhaps create new ones. And E for explore. Explore new ways of being the boss of your mind. Make some rules about how you let your thoughts make you feel and behave, and write them down to remind yourself. Now, here is one technique, and again, it's in one of the handouts that you'll be able to download. I teach children the mind jars technique. Now, this is how it goes. You think of a storage item with a lid, or you choose one that suits you. It could be, for example, doesn't have to be a jar. It could be a toy box. It could be a pencil case. It could be a box. The kids can personalize it to themselves. But let's say, for the purpose of an example, you have jars. So think of something that actually has a lid on it, and you can label these jars. You can have one for worry. So you could put your worries inside. You can have one for family, so you could put your family issues inside. One for your homework, put your homework stuff in there. And one for anger, put your angry emotions or your thoughts in there. And you can have as many jars as you like, say, to the kids. And you can even have a jar for tomorrow's stuff or a jar for past stuff, because memories or thoughts creep in. Now, this is teaching kids to compartmentalize. Consider, for example, they're sitting down to have dinner with their family, and their mind becomes the busy mind monster. And they experience overwhelm, and they're not present at the dinner table. You can say to them, well, use your jars. You can say, okay, what am I thinking in my mind? I'm worried about the homework. Put it in my jar because I'm going to do it after dinner. I'm worried about relationships at school. It's okay, I'll put it in the relationship for school jar, and whatever it is. So what they're doing is giving themselves permission to say, okay, you've popped into my head. I'm going to pop you into a jar and I'll attend to you later. Now, the beauty here is kids can draw their own jars or their own boxes or whatever it is. They can put it into a balloon and then pop it as they deal with that issue later on. So anything creative works for kids, and let them be part of the decision-making process as well. Now, well, I hope you liked that little activity that you can do with kids. Now we'll move on to dealing with unkindness. Now, this is a really important topic, because a lot of the times when kids come in and they are feeling sad, they do talk about unkindness. Now, it could be people who are unkind to them, mean kids at school, siblings being unkind. But at the same time, it can also be themselves who are unkind to themselves, for example, in the way they talk to themselves. So you might see a nice, happy face, but you don't always know exactly what it is that they're thinking in their own mind. So allowing children the opportunity to help them to deal with unkind thoughts and unkind words and find strategies to cope. It's wonderful. Kids walk away feeling that they've got a grip and control. So what I'd like to say is that unkind words can be deliberate or they can be unintentional. But once they are heard, they sometimes can plant a seed of self-doubt. So our mind is like a sponge, and this is how I explain it to kids. It's like a sponge, and it can feed on unkind thoughts and unkind words. Those thoughts then sprout in the brain like branches of trees. And if we don't know how to stop them, those branches can affect our confidence. Like I said, there could be words from somebody else or even words spoken by yourself. Now, it's important for kids to realize that they can have the power to become aware of the unkindness and how they can take charge and how they can be in control of their reaction and to switch off the emotional attachment that they're having to that unkindness, because it's always how they feel that's troubling them. So We teach kids what to do when unkind things are said. If someone says something unkind to you or you have unkind thoughts, just decide how long you want to hold on to that thought before you let it go. So this way you're giving kids the idea that, okay, I can hold on to it and I can let it go. And this means you set your own rules. If the unkindness hurts, okay, we give it a small fraction of attention because we deserve to respect our feelings, but we become the curious detective, like in the COPE formula, and consider what it was about the words and the thoughts that hurt. That way, again, they're getting to know themselves and to get to know their triggers as well. So now let's move to the COPE formula for dealing with unkind thoughts and words. Become the curious detective and challenge unkindness with your powerful mind. Create a whatever mind bin. Now, I'm going to show you in the next slide what the whatever mind bin can look like. Observe how kindness makes you feel, and you use your whatever mind bin to throw away the unkindness. Also, to use your inner coping coach to let it go and choose how you want to feel instead. Again, we're giving kids the ability to accept that they can have some level of control. And replace unkindness by smiling positively and straighten their posture, take some nice cleansing breaths, and even write down 3 or 4 positive things about themselves. And never accept kindness as the truth. Negativity doesn't belong in your head or in your body. And lastly, E for the COPE formula, new ways to respond to unkindness. Keep practicing getting good at letting unkindness go. And there's a variety of ways that kids can let things go. And it's all about them accepting and creating, and both of us, or you and kids, being creative of, hey, let's use this, and hey, let's use that. At least they know that there's a way of letting unkindness go. So now let's have a look at a fun activity. Here goes. You can ask your child or the child, close your eyes and take a minute to imagine your version of a whatever mind bin. Store it somewhere in your head. Now remember, their version can look like absolutely anything. It can be any color. It can be any size. Now, then you turn the page over and draw your own version, you say to them. So if you give them my example just to have a look at as an indication, and take a minute to think of something unkind that someone has said or done to you. Then you pick up the unkindness. You can scrunch it up, you can rip it to shreds, you can screw it into a ball, and then you can dump that unkindness into the whatever mind bin. Now, kids don't have to physically write it down and do it, although that's a really great exercise to do. It's good enough that they visualize it and they run through the whole process in their heads. But who knows? They may even create a little bin. It could be out of Lego. It could be out of paper mache. It could be one of their real bins that they label my whatever mind bin for unkindness. Anything that they wish to adopt will work for them. And then turn the corners of your mouth into a smile and say with lots of fun energy, whatever. So that way they've done a fun activity to let it go. Now, what's important also at this point is to allow kids opportunity to write, whether by themselves or with you, positive affirmations about being kind and speaking kind, not just to others, but to themselves as well, and also to make a list of good things about themselves. Quite often kids may say, oh, there's nothing good about me. Oh, this is a really good moment to discover little things that they're good at, because little things that they're good at means that they are their strengths. And when kids identify with some strengths, then they will use them for their coping skills. So I have had kids come in saying, I'm not good at anything. I don't have any strengths. But when we go through, do you share? Are you kind? Do you clean up? Do you do this? Do you try? Do you give things a go? Do you, whatever it is, and when they say, yep, well, there's a strength. And so you can change their mindset by having this conversation with them. So now we move on. This one's really important. Managing pressure and stress. This is extremely important. A lot of adults will be very happy and very interested about this as well. Now, pressure and stress. Any kids, any age, come in and they talk to me about pressure and unhelpful stress. Some people think that pressure and stress are the same thing. I like to explain it as though pressure is external and it's normally out of your control. So while stress is the result when you don't have coping skills to handle whatever pressure is happening, I like to draw that fine line. Pressure is on the outside of you. Stress is our interpretation of the pressure that's happening. So let me give you an example. Let's say kids come in and say, I'm feeling so stressed because I have homework to do. Even adults can say, I'm feeling so stressed because of work, or kids are feeling stressed because of a speech that they need to do. Whatever it is, all these things we cannot control. Your teacher is going to set homework for you. That's an external pressure. Even you turning up on time somewhere, that's external pressure. That is decided for you and it's going to be there and you can't do anything about it. That's why it's the pressure. However, how is it, and this is how I explain it to kids. Let's say you and I are in class. We get a big assignment to do and the teacher tells us what it's about and when it's due. And we both go away and you are so stressed about it and I am so calm about it. Doesn't that show you evidence that, oh, not everybody stresses? Now, what we do is compare what thought processes are you running in your mind for you to have interpreted that and created stress within your body. And then I'll tell you why I'm not stressed. And the reason why I won't be stressed is I know when it's due, I know what I have to do. I go away and I put a plan in place. And if I have a plan in place of when I'm going to do my work, what days, what times, and what in particular, when I break it down to little bits, then I have permission not to stress about it. I'm just going to stick to my timetable. It sounds easy, I know, and we're going to make mistakes, I know, but we practice. And so giving it a go, that's good enough as well. We will fail sometimes. We're human. So we give children the idea that, okay, what can you control and what can you not control? Imagination. This is a great moment where I share with kids the power of the imagination. Quite often I ask them, well, what does your imagination do when you're faced with stresses or pressures? And they would really describe something out of this world, very creative, and it's created by themselves. So I say to them, well, do you see how your imagination can be like your worst enemy? And then they will tend to say, yeah. And then I teach them, but how about if we turn the imagination into your best asset or your best resource? And they say, how? And then we look at reframing techniques, different ways to perceive, because at the end of the day, whatever is happening, it's always our interpretation and our perception that contributes to how we feel. So now we look at kids' interpretations of things, perceptions, and we map out what can we change. And then kids become open to, well, we become more flexible in our mindset and they're open to new opportunities of coping with different things. So the COPE, C-O-P-E formula for managing pressure and stress. Become the curious detective and challenge the internal stress that you place on yourself. Again, I'm inviting ownership and responsibility there. Notice the difference between external pressure and internal stress. Observe your reactions and be the boss of your mind. Would your inner coping coach ask you to change the way you speak about things? I'd guess and expect that the answer there would be yes, into a more positive way. Or make a list of positive things that you can control. And this way the kids get to learn what they can and cannot control, and use an affirmation to help you focus on the positive outcome. And lastly, E for explore. Explore what you need to do to stay out of the chaos and out of the drama. Think about your current pressures and make a plan, or even ask for help. We let kids know that they can ask for help. It could be a mentor, it could be a coach, it could be an older brother or sister, it could be a parent, it could be a teacher, it could be anybody. It even could be a friend that they see is coping well in that particular thing. So I hope that COPE formula for managing pressure and stress gives you some great ideas. Now let's look at an example. All my examples, I really like to be creative because kids love this. So play with writing your own rules. Rule 1, I always make a plan to handle what is asked of me. I think as adults, we all know planning gets rid of a lot of stresses. Planning helps us move towards being successful. Rule 2, I always base my story on facts, because when there's not facts, there's a lot of imagination, and they're not facts. They're just creativity, and they turn into creative thoughts that scare us. Rule 3, I let imagined dramas fade, and they can do that any way they want. They can do that by bringing them to their mind's attention and staring out of the window and letting them just leave, or imagining just them fading from color into black and white and then just disappearing. You can come up with something with the child. Rule 4, I'm in charge of the pressures I create for myself. That's great, because then it's showing they're the boss of their mind and they're becoming responsible and they're giving it a go, and they're drawing a line between the pressures and the stresses. And rule 5, other people's pressures belong to them and not me. Quite often kids do come in and say, oh, my friend is going through this and I'm just feeling like that because of it. Now, it's okay to feel compassionate and understanding and to be there and be a good ear. And we've got to teach kids also how to be good friends and good listeners, and not to take all that on board and create internal stress. So again, these little handouts are downloadable in the handout section as well. Now, great topic again, dealing with worry. Most kids come in and say, I've got so many worries and I'm worried about, and they worry about things they've seen on YouTube. They worry about their house being broken into. They worry about the monsters at nighttime. They worry about having dreams. They're worried about something happening to their parents, and they worry about past things, future things, present things, and there's a whole bunch of worrying that kids do. So now, worry is a normal thing, but we can be in charge of how we choose to worry and some of the coping skills we use. So to determine if something is worth worrying about, we teach children to ask, is there something that I can do about it right now? An example, I remember being worried about a decision I had to make. I did not need to make that decision for 2 days. So while I was worrying, I was not paying attention to the things that I should have been paying attention to. For example, missing out on learning in a maths class, being distracted by worry and making mistakes during sport, or, shooting goals or kicking goals. And the worry can cause stress and even conflict at home. So taking charge of worry and learning ways to deal with it and have coping skills is really important for kids. Now, let's look at a COPE formula, and then I'm going to give you a few little examples that you can do with kids. We teach kids who are worrying to become curious, be the curious detective, and challenge the worry. Sort the worries into those that you can do something about now, those that you can't do anything about yet, and those that don't really matter. It's really important to break them up, because one big worry, if there's nothing you can do about it, then you can give yourself permission to let that worry go, or even to make it a bit smaller. If there is something they can do about the worry, well, make a plan right now. What are you going to do? Do you need to ring someone? Do you need to draw something? Do you need to fix something? Do you need to read something? And that way they have a plan, even a timeline, and they do it, and the worry is solved. If there's nothing they can do about it yet, well, then they plan when they can do something about that worry. And the gap from now until that moment, they're free to not worry about it. They can focus on something different. Remember, kids that are focusing on things, or that say, and this goes for adults too, we're focusing on things so that we can get them out of our mind. That's not how we get them out of our mind. We get things out of our mind pretty much by thinking of new things and refocusing elsewhere and creating new ideas. And that way, what you're focusing on becomes something different. The other stuff that's not helpful may still be there, but it's not as big and dominating. Observe whether your imagination is getting carried away with the images and stories that it creates. Again, getting to know themselves. Write out your positive plan of action. For example, you can ask an adult or your inner coping coach for help, and visualize letting it go using any of the examples. I have a whole bunch in my chapters in my book or in my modules in my online course. And explore the possibility of whether your mind is holding on to the worry for a reason. And then can you simply say no and then stick it in the whatever mind bin? Because the whatever mind bin isn't just for unkindness. It could be for anything that you just want to let go of now. And then you can get on with what you're doing. So you're giving kids a formula, a strategy, a pathway to follow instead of being stuck in their worry. Here's an example. You can say to kids, you can do it with art, you can do it with pens, papers, Play-Doh, sand, anything, or even just the imagination. Visualize. Now remember, because it's the imagination that puts it in there, we're going to use the imagination to get rid of it as well. Visualize, release your worries. The instructions: draw a cloud or imagine a cloud. Place your worries on the cloud and visualize it drifting away from you, taking your worries away. Sometimes you can even go outside with a child, and if there is clouds, you can ask them to pick that cloud and say, okay, which worry are you going to put on that cloud there? Let them do it by themselves. They can do it all quietly, and you're just there standing with them, supporting them. And let's say it's a clear blue sky. You can always say, could you imagine if there was a cloud, where would you put it? And they may say, over there. Okay, so what worry would you put on that cloud? And there you go. They're still running through the process. Doesn't matter how you do it. Being creative is the best way. And then they can blow with their breath and visualize the cloud going away. Another activity. And the reason why I've got the same activity with different things is because somebody may prefer clouds, someone may prefer the train, someone may prefer a rocket ship, which you'll see next. And you give them the options and they'll pick something that resonates with them. Visualizing your worries, okay, you can draw a train, or they may even have a train, or you may have a train, and one with carriages, and you can say, okay, load all of your worries onto the train, whether it's on different carriages or the entire train, and then you can say, now let the train move away and take your worries with it and say goodbye to your worries. And whilst I'm saying it in 10 seconds, this might take them a few minutes, 10 minutes, but you let them. If this is how they're going to learn to release their worries and it's going to work for them and they're enjoying the experience, wonderful. And then you can invite them to even take that as a imagery or a guided visualization for themselves. Or if you're a parent, you can do it with them overnight or at any time. But if they learn this skill to do it by themselves, then they're independent and they can always imagine their train, putting their worries on a carriage. See you later. And like I said, some kids might like a rocket ship. So Visualize, release your worries, draw a rocket ship, place your worries onto the rocket ship. Send your rocket ship into space through the solar system. As it lands on different planets, visualize it dropping off all your worries along the way. Say bye-bye to your worries. And allow them to even stretch out that story. They could say, oh, I went around Mars a few times and most of my worries, I chose to put them on this planet or that planet. Remember, creativity is the way to go, and even allow them to create their own. These are just examples. So I hope you liked these examples, and you're probably creative enough to think of other ways that you can choose to do it for your children or even for yourself or for your students at school. It's all about being creative and just being open to, I don't know, feedback from kids, using your imagination, changing things. At the end of the day, they get to learn that there's something that they can do about their worries. So now, let's move on. Coping with anything, anytime. Now, this particular chapter in my book, or this particular module in my online course, is the very last one. I've presented to you today a number of different important topics, but there's more. There's moving away from sadness. There's how to deal with anger. There's how to be like winning and not winning. So there's stuff that you do with being a good sportsman, sportswoman, sportsperson, and probably one or two others that aren't coming to my mind right now. Right at the end, we realize that, okay, that COPE formula that we go through at the end of each chapter, and in each chapter or module, we look at examples and we do like little bits of psychoeducation as well. But that COPE formula also becomes a general one, so you can cope with anything, anytime. So they don't always have to say, oh, I don't remember my COPE formula for dealing with anger. They've just got to know that they are C for curious, they are O for the observer, they are P for being positive, and they are E for the explorer. Now, right at the end, we talk about emotions and how they show up. Sometimes you don't recognize emotions because they hide themselves as sensations in your body. You could be hesitant, you could be anxious, you could be satisfied, you could be happy, joyful, ashamed, eager, whatever it is. Now, I've noticed that a lot of the young kids are feeling emotions, say, for example, before a race. Now, I use this example because it's true. My friend and I were at the beginning of a running event. I love running. I'm a marathon runner, and she does not like running, but she does it anyway. And now I remember both she and I were jumping up and down, trying to keep warm. And because of probably what it was happening, you know, you're feeling whatever you're feeling inside your stomach and your chest and etc. We are both behaving exactly the same. And as I did say to her, how are you feeling right now? And we're both laughing and giggling and telling stories, etc., mirroring each other. And she said to me, I'm so anxious, I'm so nervous. And I said, why? I'm so excited about this. Now, I think most of us who have had the education or read the material, we know physiologically anxiety and excitement have the same physiological responses. So consider now the example of kids before a race. And they're jumping around and whatever, warming up their hands or jumping on the spot and whatever they're doing that we can imagine right now. Once upon a time, we were saying, look how excited they are. I'm finding that these days we are saying, oh, look how anxious they are. I also feel that kids are learning this language. Kids are saying, I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm anxious. I'm trying, and this works very well, to reframe it with kids and say, well, how do you know you're actually not excited? You're at the beginning of a race, you're smiling, you're laughing, you're talking to everyone. You're supposed to feel what you're feeling before a race. Nobody walks up and is slouched over and, has no emotional stuff going on inside. What I teach kids at this point is, what is your brain hearing? Is your brain hearing, I'm nervous and excited, or I'm nervous and I'm anxious and I'm not happy, whatever it is? So this does open up their minds to thinking, oh, I didn't think of it like that. I invite them now to adopt new ways of thinking. It's our perceptions and our interpretations. So we practice new language so that kids can just embrace new positive language, or it doesn't even have to be positive. Neutral is always good enough, as long as we get rid of that negative talk. So, what was I up to? Okay. Let's go to the next slide since I blabbed on there. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Let's go to the COPE formula for coping with anything, anytime. Become the curious detective about absolutely everything. If you experience a strong sensation when you have an emotion or a thought, stop and call your inner coping coach team to the control room, which we create in our minds. Ask the team which of the coping skills will help you. So they take a time out and they go inside, they reflect, they evaluate, and they become resourceful within themselves. Observe your body and make a list of your emotions, of your thoughts and your sensations. This way, they can determine, are there any patterns? And consult with your inner coping team to work out what those emotions and sensations tell you. These patterns are really important for kids to see. Quite often, kids will come and say, oh, this happens and then I behave like that. And when I say, so what were you thinking during that time? They can't remember. And that's because they've been so overwhelmed with emotion, even adults. We know that when we have a heightened emotional reaction, we can't really make logical decisions. I know myself, if ever I've been in a state of extreme emotion, it's wiser for me to say to my friend, can you help me make a decision here? I'm not thinking clearly. And so the thoughts are really important. Now, some kids say the thoughts are what scare me and I behave that way and I'm trying to change thoughts. I've discovered with kids and with adults that, well, let's try change the behaviors and then the thoughts may follow. So moving on to that, using a positive affirmation each week and repeating it to themselves. The brain likes repetition. So it's really useful just to repeat what you want the brain to hear and what you want to learn as well. That's why affirmations are really good. Some kids write them down, cut them out, stick them in their lunch boxes, in their books, whatever, however, and even have reminders on their phones for those who are using mobile phones. Things that they can say is, I love and accept me, or I'm learning to let stuff go. And that way, this is much useful than saying, I'm stuck and I hate me and I can't do anything. So new language is very useful. And exploring other patterns that arise when you don't feel right. We teach kids, you're in control of how you react. It's okay to feel. It's okay to feel angry, to feel sad, to feel worried. What you do with that emotion is what counts. Now, if what you've been doing, if the reaction that you've been doing up until now needs to change because you want it to change and because maybe someone else has indicated to you, let's make a change, then You are in charge of creating new ways to respond and react to your emotions. And it all takes practice. So we teach children as the explorer part of the formula, look for ways to move forward and create the better version of yourself. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I really hope that you all got something out of this. I did go through it at a fast pace. I hope that it was still understandable for those of you who were able to tune in. And I always tell kids to take away with them, don't cop it, cope with it. And they can always write that out and remind themselves, don't cop it, cope with it. If anybody would like to stay connected with me, I do have my social media links. They are on the last 2 pages of my slides for when you download them. And let's say somebody was interested in a free guide, no obligation. The very first link here leads you to a free guide. If you did want a copy of the book, it's the next link, and straight to the course. The course is really, really handy for kids. It's almost going to be, for some kids, their very, very first opportunity to do their own self-learning. It's online. They work through different modules at their own pace. They get to download. It could be some affirmations. It could be their handouts. They get the script. They get the slides. They get the COPE formula. And right at the end, kids also get a certificate. So this is really empowering for kids to feel that can cope with anything, anytime. Thank you so much, everybody. That's it from me.
I want to say thank you so much also from me and on behalf of everyone who was on the session today and who will be watching the recording. You can see people who are here live, all of the comments in the chat, Amanda. People have been so grateful for your wisdom and for me, your practical strategies. These are really powerful, practical strategies that you can take away and work. And as people said, not just for kids, they can work and you can adapt them for adults also. So everyone, as you can tell, yes, you can see Sarah saying the same thing, how practical the tools are in the chat. So I don't know, Amanda, if you have a moment. Bonnie's just asking, how do you find this works with autistic children? I don't know if you wanted to make a comment on that.
Absolutely. I have a lot of children who are autistic who come to the clinic, and I use this COPE formula for absolutely everybody. Do we need to modify it? Sure. Do they give me input? They give me wonderful input too. So the answer there is yes, absolutely.
And I want to reiterate that also, that these techniques are actually universal, and Amanda's taken them and adapted them. For those of us who've been trained in psychotherapy and neuro-linguistic programming and counselling and all of that sort of stuff, I can see what you've done here, Amanda, and I just want to congratulate you. You've done really great work being able to take these very powerful strategies and adapt them to make them practical for kids. You've done really great work here. I highly recommend it to everyone. Be sure to check out Amanda's resources, and in the handout section you can download all of the handouts that Amanda has here for us today. Thanks again, Amanda, for sharing this with our audience.
Thank you too. And I've just been able to scroll through these comments, which I did not dare to even look at while I was presenting, but all the wonderful thank you comments. I'm so very grateful. I'm also grateful that I was able to share anything that I've learned, and I hope it's useful for you and anybody else around you. Thank you for your wonderful comments.